This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good evening, Rabbi Glatstein for Chanukah. Tonight we want to speak about a very important subject. We're going to speak about a question that I'm sure we're all familiar with. It's probably the second most famous question regarding Chanukah. Aside from the well-known question of the Beis Yosef, this is probably the most well-known question, and that's the Kasha of the Pnei Yeshua. By the way, it happens to be the Kasha. He wasn't the first to ask the question. It was preceded by the Shas Shuvas Chacham Tzvi, and there's also the Kasha of Rav Shlomo Kluger. And the question goes as follows. We know the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't like to change nature unless he has to. The Rebbeinu Shalom likes Olam Kimin Hagay Noyeg. He likes the world to sort of run on autopilot without people realizing that the Rebbeinu Shalom is stepping in and changing the laws of nature. That's how the Rebbeinu Shalom likes it. He doesn't want to change things. He doesn't want to reveal himself openly. And therefore the question is, if any time the Rebbeinu Shalom performs a miracle, it's because he has to. There's no alternative. You know, we're running out of Mitzrayim, and the Mitzrayim are on one side, and the Yam's on the other side. We have nowhere to go. So what's the Rebbeinu Shalom going to do? He has to split the Yamsuf. You know, there's no alternative. But if there's no need to make a miracle, then the Rebbeinu Shalom will not do so. And therefore, the Pnei Yeshua asks, Rabbi Yaakov Yehoshua Falk, who lived from 1680 to 1756. Frek the Heilige Pnei Yeshua l'chayra yesh l'tzmaya kol Torah chanes zeh lama. Why did we need the whole bother of the miracle that they searched and they searched for tahar oil, and they found one flask, and there was only enough to last for one night, and miraculously lasted for 8 nights? Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom have to do that? What would have happened if we wouldn't have found tahar oil? You know what would have happened? So people say, we would have been stuck. We wouldn't have been able to light the menorah. It's not true. We would have been able to light the menorah. There's a concept, Tumah Hutra B'tzibur, which means there's a drasha. If an ish is tameh, he can't do the avodah, but a tzibur that's tameh is allowed to do the avodah. Frek the Pnei Yeshua, why did the Rebbeinu Shalom have to make a miracle? We didn't need the miracle. We could have done the avodah b'tumah. Says the Pnei Yeshua. So you'll say, it's probably better to do the avodah b'tara, right? Maybe the miracle was needed because it's preferable to do the avodah b'tahara. Says the Pnei Yeshua, Bishlam, according to the Shita, Masechta Psachim, Tumah Hudcha B'tzibur. Tumah Hudcha means like this, that you have the Chuya, right? That means you have a mitzvah of avodah, you have a prohibition of Tumah, so the mitzvah of avodah pushes away the Isser of Tumah. That means the Isser of Tumah is present, it's a force to reckon with, but we have something that supersedes. If you look at it that way, it's better to do the avodah b'tahara, so we don't have to push anything away. But according to the Manda Amar, says the Pnei Yeshua, Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. Hutra means that when the tzibur is tameh, it's not that we push away the Yisra of doing the Avodah B'tumah. There is no Yisra of doing the Avodah B'tumah. It's not even better. It's not even a hiddur. But Rabbi, is it an inyan? You know, that's the most common question a rabbi gets is, I know I don't have to do, but is it an inyan? There are no inyanim. Either mutter, Asr, L'chadchila, Hiddur. Says the Pnei Yeshua, there's no Hiddur to do the Avodah B'tara. If there's no Hiddur, then there's no need to make a miracle. In fact, the Pnei Yeshua, Afilu Hadurei Loi Mahadrinon, Kedisa B'yuma Imkein Kasha Tuva. That's the Kasha of the Pnei Yeshua. Why was the miracle necessary? Then the next thing I want to bring to your attention is an incredible diuk. Every morning we say, in Karbanos, we say the Parsha of the Tamid. Now, twice in the Torah, the Parsha of the Tamid appears, the Karban Tamid. You have in Parshas Pinchas, that's what we read in the morning in the Parshas Tamid, and then you have in Parshas Tetzaveh. Esakeves achot ta'asa v'aboiker v'yesakeves hasheni ta'asa ben harabayim. So if you analyze the nuances of the wording between Tetzaveh and Pinchas, you'll notice there's a slight discrepancy. It says, Es hakeves ha'echad ta'aseh v'haboiker v'yes hakeves ha'sheni. That's in Tetzaveh. In Parshas Pinchas, it's hakeves echad ta'aseh v'haboiker. That's a kasha. Why in Parshas Tetzaveh is it hakeves ha'echad, and Parshas Pinchas is hakeves echad, right? It's a big kasha. Probably your whole life you never slept well, because this was troubling you. You never, you never got a real good night's sleep. Baruch Hashem, tonight for the first time you're going to sleep well. We have to understand why the first time in Tetzaveh is a keves ha'echad, and the second time it's keves echad. You say, who would ask such a question? none other than the Brisker Rav, the Griz. This is the Kasha, the Griz. In Chidushe Imar na Griz Alevi, Ois Kuf Tezvav, he wants to know why in Tetzav it's Ha'echad, and the second time it's Echad. So what we're going to present tonight is the approach of Rabbi Yosef Engel. They just came out. My dear Chaver in Muncie is the head of the Machon of publishing the Svarma of Rabbi Yosef Engel. He just came out a few weeks ago with the Drushas of Rabbi Yosef Engel, revised, fully edited, annotated, and Oitzrois Yosef. So this comes from Rabbi Yosef Engel in Gilyoinei Hashas, not to be confused with Gilyon Hashas. Gilyon Hashas is a goes Rabbi Kiva Eger. The Rabbi Yosef Engel was a Rav in Krakow in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and one of the all-time great minds. He was a Baki in not only Nigla, in Nistar and in Sifrei Chasidus, and his style is to blend it all together, to get the Lamdus out of the Machshava and the Machshava out of the Lamdus, a very unique style. And Rabbi Yosef Engel is buried in Vienna, and I had the privilege this past summer to be at his kever, and check it out on Torah Anytime. We have a 10-minute incredible clip, professional videography of the cemetery in Vienna at the kever of Rabbi Yosef Engel. Okay, be it as it may. What? TorahAnytime.com. By the way, Torah Anytime is an excellent website. If you happen to have a computer, there's an excellent website, and there are a lot of speakers on it. So if you're, you should try to watch our Shiurim. You know, that's what I would recommend. But where? I'll tell you after. It was in July. I'll send you the link. Okay. So anyway, so Rabbi Yosef Engel says like this. Rabbi Yosef Engel presents the following idea. There's a Torah's Kohanim. We know that on the day that the Mishkan was inaugurated, so who passed away? Nadav and Avihu passed away. And now their bodies lay in the Mikdash, in the Mishkan, and now we have to get them out. So who did Moshe send to schlep out the dead bodies? Mishael. Mishael was not a Kohen. So the Asikenim Mibali HaTosfos quotes the Torah's Kohanim, and the Torah's Kohanim says, why couldn't they send Nadav Avihu to schlep out, why couldn't they send out Elazar and Isamar to schlep out Nadav Avihu? Why did they need to send out Mishael, who's a non-Kohen? Why couldn't they send the brothers to schlep out Nadav Avihu? Why couldn't Elazar and Isamar schlep them out? Says the Torah's Kohanim, we see from here, Kohanim are now to be Matame. That's what the Torah's Kohanim says. The fact that they sent Mishael and they didn't send Elazar Isamar is a raya that Kohanim are not allowed to become Tameh. So Frek Tosfos, I need a raya that Kohanim are not allowed to be Tameh. It's a pasuk in Chumash. L'nefesh le'yitama b'ama. It's pasuk in Emra. I don't need a raya that Kohanim are not allowed to be Matame. Sveitins, and secondly, there's a Bam Kash over here. Why couldn't Elazar and Isamar be Matame? After all, they're brothers, and a Kohen is allowed to be Matame to the Sheva Krovim. So number one, why do I need a limud that Kohanim are now to be Matame? It's a pasuk in Chumash. Frek Tosfos, in the Das Academy Bali HaTosfos, number 5. And number 2, why Taka couldn't Elazar and Isamar be Matame to Nadav Avihu? Answers Tosfos, a Chidush. That when we say Kohanim are now to be Matame, we know Kohanim are now to be Matame. It means Kohanim are now to be Matame to Krovim on the day that they're inaugurated and anointed to be Kohanim for the first time. On the day that a Kohen is anointed, he has the status of a Kohen Gadol. And if he has a status of Kohen Gadol, he's now to be Matame L'Kroivim. What the Torah's Kohanim means is not this is a Makar that a Kohen is now to be Matame. It's a Makar that a Kohen on the day of his inauguration is now to be Matame to Kroivim, because a Kohen on the day of his inauguration has a status of a Kohen Gadol. In fact, Tosfos quotes another Rishon, the Bechor Shar, that normally a Kohen is not allowed to let his hair grow long. But a Kohen Hedyot is allowed to let his hair grow long for one of the Sheva Kroivim. But nevertheless, these Elazar and Isamar were not allowed to let their hair grow long at that time, because since it was at the time of their inauguration, they had to be extra careful. They had the status of a Kohen Gadol. They could not let their hair grow long. So what's Tosfos saying? Tosfos is saying a very interesting principle. That even though Kohanim are allowed to be Matame to relatives, on the day they're inaugurated, on the day they're initiated, they have a higher status. We're more machmir with them, and therefore they would not be allowed to be metami l'kroivim on the day of their inauguration. Okay, that's what we see from Tosfos. So Rabbi Yosef Engel says we learn the following yesod, that even when something might be ordinarily mutter, and something might ordinarily be okay, but in the beginning you have to be more strict. In the initiation stage, in the inauguration stage, you have to be more machmir. Yes, b'di'eved. Yeah, is it mutter? It's mutter b'di'eved. Yeah, b'di'eveds are only okay once you got going. You can't rely on a b'di'eved the first time. I'll give you another example. Aran in Masechta Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, when the Jews came into Eretz Yisrael, they wanted to eat. They wanted to eat the grain. The only thing is you can't eat the grain until you bring the carbon oimer. So the Gemara asks, how did they bring a carbon oimer? Gemara says, what do you mean? There was stuff growing in Eretz Yisrael when they came in. Frek the Gemara, it says, Kitzir Artsechem, it has to be stuff that grew in your land, and this stuff grew under the auspices of the Goyim. They just got there, so they couldn't use that grain for the carbon oimer. So that's what the Gemara has. Matmiya, the Gemara asks, what did they use? Yeah? What did they use for the carbon oimer? Answers the Ran. The Ran asked the following kasha. What do you mean what they use? Maybe they use the stuff that grows me'ever layarden, in God's territory, in the territory of Ruvain. After all, the halacha is that if you use produce that grew me'ever layarden, it's kosher for the carbon oimer. So what's the Gemara asking? What did they use when they came to Eretz Yisrael? They used the produce me'ever layarden. Answers the Ran, yes. If you bring the carbon oimer from produce that grew me'ever layarden, it's kosher. But it's a mitzvah to use things that grow in Eretz Yisrael proper. And it's not mistaber, says the Ran, that the first time Klal Yisrael ever brought the carbon oimer, they relied on something that's not mahadran. Meaning, avad, if they would have used the produce me'ever layarden, it would have been good. But since there's a special mitzvah in general to use the stuff that grows in Yehuda, therefore it's not mistaber the first time they relied on the produce me'ever layarden. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, what we see from here is that even if something is mutter, but you don't rely on heterim, you don't rely on b'di'eveds, you don't rely on it's okay, it's good enough the first time when you're mechanech something, when you initiate something, when you inaugurate something. The reason is, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, the first time something is done, that's the shoyresh of the future history of that particular mitzvah. And since everything follows suit after that first time, the first time you do something, you got to do it perfectly. It has to be, in other words, the first time you do a mitzvah, you want to do it perfectly. The first thing you do in the morning, you want it to be a dvar mitzvah. You want to start things off in the proper way. Rabbi Yosef Engel brings a very interesting raya. The Rabbi Yosef Engel says, Gemara in Zvachim refers to a carbon chatos as the chatos of Nachshon ben Aminadav. And the Gemara asks, why do we refer to a carbon chatos as the chatos of Nachshon ben Aminadav? Because the first carbon chatos ever brought was the carbon chatos of Nachshon ben Aminadav. So what? So Rashi says, look at number 7, Shoyresh hachatos, the root of a chatos, shehi hoisa chatos yachad rishayna. The first carbon chatos brought is the root of all carbon chatos. Therefore, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, since the first time something is done is the root of all its future history, and therefore we have to be so careful that the first time we do something, it has to be ideal, it has to be perfect, it has to be behidr. Yes, avada and avada, if it would have been a different occasion and most of Klal Yisrael would have been tamei, they could have lit the menorah with tamei oil. But this wasn't any old occasion. We know the Yevanim were meshakitz the mizbeach. They defiled the mizbeach. You know why? You know there's a very important mitzvah, a very important mitzvah where Klal Yisrael are mamish moiser nefesh. The doctors here would know that Klal Yisrael mamish every Chanukah they're moiser nefesh to eat things that jeopardize their health and really raise the uric acid levels of their bodies and raise the cholesterol levels of their bodies and spike up the sugar levels, and that's they eat donuts, which is mamish sakanas nefashos. What's pshat in Minhag Yisrael Torah that people eat these things that jeopardize their health? The answer is, Rav Shlomo Zalman writes about this. Rav Shlomo Zalman says the reason for eating jelly donuts is because if you just make Berachas Hamazon, so then you can't daven for the restoration of the Mizbeach. But when you say an alamicha, you could be mispalel, v'yal mizbechecha, v'yal heichalecha. And the Yivanim, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, we're meshakitz the mizbeach. Therefore, the only way we could be mispalel to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to restore the kedusha of the mikdash, is by eating jelly donuts, because obviously the only mazonos that anyone could ever eat is a jelly donut. And therefore, that's the reason for the minhag, says Rav Shlomo Zalman. So, what do we learn from here? We see that the mizbeach shut down, and the Beis HaMikdash shut down, the Bach says, and they had to re-inaugurate it. If you look in the Marsha says that the word Chanukah, he disagrees, Chanukah, it was the re-inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash. In fact, that's why we lean of the Karbonis of the Nesiim on Chanukah. So therefore, the lighting of the menorah is the first inaugural service of the menorah after it sort of shut down. Therefore, since this is the first lighting of the menorah, Avada in general, Tumah Shabbat Tzibur, but not the first time. Not the first time that you inaugurate the lighting of a menorah. You can't rely on Tumah Shabbat Tzibur. You have to be machmir, you have to be makbid. You can't rely on kulos, you can't rely on b'di'eveds. And that's why they needed the miracle, because Tumah Shabbat Tzibur does not work for Chinuch. Likewise, Rav Shlomo Kluger in the Chachmas Shlomo in Shulchan Aruch, he brings down the kasha, Tumah Shabbat Tzibur. And about 5 lines from the end, he says, "Va'oid afilu zulas zenira," that afilu l'mandam ratumotru b'tzibur. That's for the guf ha'avoida. Aval lechanich tchilas beis hamikdash chinuch betchila tzarich lios b'tahirim. And therefore, they could not rely on the klal of tumahotru b'tzibur. So the same answer as Rabbi Yosef Engel.
So does that assume Chanukah Tzabayas lasts 8 days?
What?
Does that assume that Chanukah Tzabayas lasts 8 days?
The oil lasted for 8 days, and after that, they got new oil. What do you mean? The reason? Oh, you mean why did it have to last for 8 days?
Right. I understand that it had to be tamei for the first day for the chinuch, but
I mean, according to this, that the only reason they needed a miracle was because they needed to do it the first time, but tahara. Why did the miracle have to make it last for 8 days? It should have only lasted for 1 day, and then after that, use tumah.
yeah.
It's a nice kasha, good kasha. I hear, good kasha. You're right, but once you're mechanech the first night, the second night you could do b'tumah.
Doesn't work like that.
How long does the chinuch last for? And I'm saying you could. Well, I'm saying why? How long is the haskalah? You mean?
Say that it ended on the first day.
I mean, the chinuch is a 1 day thing, no?
The foundations.
I mean, the klal is the first time. I'll give you an example. I'll show you the example of the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav says like this: "As hakeves achot tasav aboiker, as hakeves hasheni tasav ben arbayim." So the Brisker Rav says, "What's the halacha if I'm not makriv the keves in the morning?" We know by karbonos it starts. Kachim goes by the day, right? Kachim goes by the day. Let's say I'm not makriv the carbon tamid shel shachar. Am I allowed to be makriv the carbon tamid shel ben arbayim? So the Gemara says in Menachos and Daf Nun that if you're not makriv the keves ba'boiker, don't be makriv the keves ben arbayim. But that's only if this is the chinuch of the mizbeach. That if you're mechanich the mizbeach and you're not makriv shel shachar, don't be makriv shel ben arbayim. Once the mizbeach is already in full force and you're not makriv shel shachar, you're allowed to be makriv shel ben arbayim. So that would presume that it only takes 1 avodah or 1 day to inaugurate something. But be it as it may, the Brisker Rav says like this: the pasuk in Tetzaveh is talking about the Shivas Yimei HaMiluim. This was the carbon tamid of the Shivas Yimei HaMiluim. In the Shivas Yimei HaMiluim, the carbon tamid shel shachar must be shel shachar, and if it's not b'shel shachar, you can't do bein shel bein arbayim. Therefore, in Parshas Tetzaveh, it's hakeves ha'echad, the first one. It must be the first one. If you don't do it first, you can't do Hasheni. But in Parshas Pinchas, it's talking about the carbon tamid in general. Carbon tamid in general, avada, you're supposed to do ba'boiker and then bein arbayim. But it's not ha'echad. It's not behei ayadi. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be that if you're not makriv shel shachar, then you could be makriv shel bein arbayim. So it's a beautiful answer. That's why the first time in Tetzaveh by the Shivas Yimei HaMilum it's ha'echad, and in Parshas Pinchas it's just echad. Yeah.
The bein arbayim was given. Right? That was the first carbon that was given.
Well, but by Chanukah they inaugurated the menorah is at night.
Right, so that right before the menorah was the bein arbayim, the pundit spoke down that the Chanukah was for.
No, they couldn't have done that. No, so they didn't. So they didn't. Yeah?
Yeah.
They couldn't have, right? That's what the Gemara is saying, that if by Chinuch, B'chal, they didn't have a Mizbeach.
Inaugurated Mizbeach Hazon.
Yeah, so...
However, the Torah was what brought that.
So Ktoiras, but not the Talmud Shalbein Obayim, right?
How long do you think?
We don't know. I mean, they inaugurated the Mizbeach. See, the truth is, when they inaugurated the Mizbeach in Nasa, it took 12 days. So you see that inauguration takes time.
Process.
You see that, and I'm remembering now that in the Navi Yechezkel, the second Beis Hamikdash was inaugurated from Gimel Adar until Chav Dalet Adar, 21 days. So it could be that there is a process of inauguration. Maybe it's not just one time. Okay, I once heard from Rabbi Weinfeld in Flatbush. He has a show on Ellen 22nd. He says, based on this Brisker Rav, you could say there's a very interesting Gemara in Megillah Daf Chav Ches. The Gemara says that one time Rabbi Akiva went over to Rabbi Nechunya Hagadol. I always had an itch to do this. And Rabbi Nechunya Hagadol is a very old man, and he asked him, tell me, why were you Zaycha to live so long? I would love to ask Gedolim that question. Why are you Zaycha to... Now, imagine if some schlepper off the street comes over to the Gadol Hadar. Rabbi, why did you live so long? The bouncer is going to knock him out. They're not going to chutzpah. You ask him why he lived so long. Because we didn't let people like you bother him. That's why he lived so long, But so that's where the Reish Galusa came, and they started whacking Rabbi Akiva, and he had to run up to the top of a tree because they didn't know he was Rabbi Akiva. They thought he was Stam, a nudnik. So Rabbi Akiva needed to show that he's a Talmid Chacham. So how did he show? Amar le Rebbe, im nemar keves, lama nemar echad. Why does it say keves echad in Parshas Pinchas? I mean, what was the big chachma that Rabbi Akiva was showing by asking, if it says keves, why does it say echad? So this Rabbi Weinfeld, he's asking the Brisker Rav's kasha. Why the first time in Parshas Tetzav is the keves ha'echad, and in Parshas Pinchas it's keves echad. Okay, so be it as it may, this is the Yesod of Rabbi Yosef Engel. It's based on 4 Makairos. Number 1, it's based on Chanukah. In other words, why did the miracle of Chanukah, why was it needed? Just use Tamei oil. It must be the first time around you don't rely on Tumah B'tzibur. Number 2, why couldn't Elazar and Isamar be Matami to Nadav Avihu? Because on the day of their Hamshacha, they had a din of a Kohen Gadol, and therefore on the beginning of something it's more Chamor. Number 3, the Kasha, the Ran, that why couldn't Klal Yisrael bring the Karban Omer from Ever LeYarden? The answer is the first time you got to do it right. And number 4, the Lashon of Rashi, that we call a Karban Chatos the Chatos of Nachshoin, because that sets the tone for all future Chatos.
What did they do with the carbon iron, by the way? Does it say?
What did they do?
There's a name.
So look over there. Toysus has a kasha. Why don't you say asay say that the mitzvah the omer be that the mitzvah be madcha the yisra of chadash? What did they do? The Maisa, I don't remember.
They did something and grew 4 days.
What?
It was something that they planted and grew 4 days.
Yeah, the Gemara in Tainus says in the times of Yoel. Yeah, for the Karban Omer, they planted on
3-4 days before.
they planted on Gimel,
Right.
and then it grew on Yud Dalet, and Yud Aleph Yoim usually takes 6 months. It's Gemara in Tainus on Daf Hey that usually would take 6 months. It took them 11 days, right? That's the Gemara. But this is something else. What did Klal Yisrael use for the Omer when they came into Eretz Yisrael? Okay, comes with Sri Pesach Frank, and he says that a certain Gadol asked him the following shaila. He said, why can't we be makriv karbonos b'zman hazeh? You ever wonder about that? The Rambam Paskins, we said this in Shiur on a Sunday, that makrivim kol karbonos kulam afal pi she'en abayis bonei. You're allowed to be makriv all the karbonos, even though there's no Beis Hamikdash. So why are we not makriv karbonos today? Elamai, you'll say, because we're all tamei. That's not a reason. Tamah hutra b'tzibur. So this God that wanted to say, yeah, Tamah hutra b'tzibur. But since it stopped for so many years, once we want to start, that's Chinuch. And for Chinuch, you don't say Tamah hutra b'tzibur, and that's Pshat in the miracle of Chanukah. That's why we don't bring karbanos today, because Tamah hutra b'tzibur does not apply when you're mechanech something. And comes Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, and he says, I vehemently disagree. This Yisoid is not correct. There is no such halacha that the first time you do something, you don't say Tamah hutra b'tzibur. And he says, I'll bring you 2 rayas. It's a beferish Toisvis and Tainus. Toisvis, any Kaihanim here? any aspiring kohanim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'hakoel nהיה b'barei. Ezra, you're a kohen. I remember that. So Ezra's a kohen. So the Gemara says that if you're a kohen, and you know what day, what week your family served in the Beis HaMikdash, and you know what day of the week your family served, you're not allowed to drink wine on that day. So if you know your family served the 17th week of the year on a Tuesday, the 17th week of the year, you're not allowed to drink wine, because maybe Mashiach will come, and the Beis HaMikdash will be built, and they'll come to you, no, Ezra, do the Avodah, and you'll be a shtickle shikar. So therefore, don't drink wine on the day that you know that your family served. Fraktoisis, what's the problem? Mashiach comes, the kohen won't be able to serve because he's a shikar. And even if he's not a shikar, he can't do the avodah, because we're all tameh. So what are we worried about? Oh, don't drink wine! Mashiach might come and your shasuya yayin is also avodah. There's a bigger problem. Kohanim are tameh. Answers Tosis, no. The fact that kohanim are tameh is not a problem. Toma hotra b'tzibur, Tosis says. Fractal tzvi Pesach. What do you mean Toma hotra b'tzibur? But if Mashiach comes, well, that will be the Chinuch of the Mizbeach. We don't say Tumah Hutra B'tzibur on Chinuch. Is a raya from Tosfos at the Yesod of Rabbi Yosef Engel is not correct. Now he doesn't quote Rabbi Yosef Engel by name, but you see clearly in Tosfos that Tosfos is asking, why are we worried about Kohanim drinking wine even if they don't drink wine? They still can't do the Avodah because they're Tameh. And the answer of Tosfos is Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. Ribono shel olam, Tumah Hutra B'tzibur doesn't apply to Chinuch.
But when Moshe comes, Hashem himself removes the tumah from the whole world.
Okay. Yeah, but the Ruach HaTumah, but the halacha of Tumah, you're still going to need Paraduma, l'chayra. And that's what...
Other alternative, though. Meaning in other cases,
yeah.
Right, with Aaron's son, right, you could ask somebody else to do it. Over here, there's now one person that's going to be tar. So here there's Tumah Hutra B'tzibur because there's no other alternative.
But Rabbi Yosef Engel is saying Tumah Hutra B'tzibur does not apply by Chinuch. That means it's asur to do it b'tumah. So you want to say it's not...
What's the other choice? Then what's the other choice? Meaning with that, then
we wait for the paraduma. Well, the choice is drink as much wine as you want, because if Mashiach comes, you can't do that void anyway for 7 days. So I think, no, so Asi's saying good, that maybe a way to answer up Rabbi Yosef Engel would be to say like this. Rabbi Yosef Engel doesn't mean that Tumah Hutra B'tzibur is asur to rely on the first time. He doesn't mean that it's asur to do the Avodah B'tumah. It's mutter to do the Avodah B'tumah. The concept is, it's better not to. It's better not the first time to rely on Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. You're allowed to, it's not asur. So in the time of the miracle of Chanukah, had Hashem not made a miracle, we would have done it b'tumah. But since it's better not to, because it's the first time, the miracle had a benefit. Masha'in Kain, what do you want to tell a Kayin? Reb Kayin, don't drink wine. Why? Because Mashiach might come. So the Kayin says, even if Mashiach comes, I still have a problem because I'm tameh. So the answer to that is Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. What do you mean? The first time, you're not supposed to rely on that. No, it's only better not to. But at the end of the day, if Mashiach would come, and you're going to do the Avodah, we're not going to not do the Avodah, because since it's the first time, we don't say Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. It's more like the Ran said. The Ran said, it's not, nira that the first time they didn't do it properly. It's only not proper to do it b'tumah the first time. It's not that categorically we don't utilize the principle of Tumah Hutra B'tzibur the first time. However, Rabbi Yosef, the Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank, brings another raya against the concept of Rabbi Yosef Engel and the Rav Shlomo Kluger from another Tosfos in Parsha Shmini by the Miluim. And that is, we know, on that day, they had a sa'ir, and the sa'ir became tameh, and they burnt it. Why did they burn it? Number 14. So the sa'ir of Rosh Chodesh, they burnt because it became tameh. Remember in Parsha Shmini, V'yes ha-sa'ir, darosh darash Moshe v'hinei sayraf. Moshe wanted to know why they burn it. And Tosfos says they burnt it because it became tameh. So Tosfos asks, why do they have to burn it? They should have been makriv it b'tumah, because Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. So I asked the Tzvi Pesach Frank, what do you mean they should have been makriv b'tumah? That was the carbon that was mechanech the Mishkan. The Sar of Rosh Chodesh as the first ever Sar of Rosh Chodesh. We don't say Tumah B'tzibur on the first carbon Sar of Rosh Chodesh. It must be, says Rav Tzvi Pesach, that this Yisoid is not correct, that even on Chinuch you say Tumah B'tzibur. We could say what we just said for the other Raya from Tosfos, that Lamaisa, all you see from here is that it would have been mutter to be makar of it, but it could be, it still would have been better. It's still better not to rely on that. And therefore, in the times of Chanukah, Hashem made a miracle so as not to have to rely on Tumah B'tzibur the first time around. Okay, more Rabbi said, but what we're bringing out from here is that the first time something is done is different than every other time. Every other time, maybe you could rely on Heterim, you could rely on Tumah B'tzibur, you could be makar of the Omer from Ever LaYarden, you could, like we had in, you could be makar of a carbon tamid. If you're not makar of Shalbein Arabayim, a Shel Shachar, you could be makar of Shalbein Arabayim. But the first time something's done, you always have to do it right. Because if you don't set the tone in the beginning, then everything will be impugned. Everything will be a Baal Mum from the first time that it wasn't done properly. So everything will be tainted. So what I want to bring to your attention now is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that everyone's familiar with, and it's a Mishnah Pliya. The Mishnah says like this, number 16. Elisha ben Avuya Omer. Haloi made yeled lemahu daim. If somebody learns as a kid, what is he like? L'diyai ksuv al niyar chadash. He's like ink written on new paper. V'haloi made zaken, someone who learns as an old man. Lamahu daim. L'diyai ksuv al niyar machak. It's like writing on erased paper. So we know when you write on fresh paper, the ink holds well to the paper. When you write on old paper, the ink fades fast. What Elisha ben Avuya said, when you're a kid, it's fast, it holds. When you learn when you're older, well, in one ear and out the other. Comes a Satmar Rebbe, he asks an obvious question on the Mishnah. Elisha ben Avuya? Anybody know how many times Elisha ben Avuya is quoted in Mishnayos and Shas? This is it. 0. Just this. You know why? Because he wasn't a good guy, Elisha ben Avuya. He went off the derech. He was the Rebbe Rameir, and the Chachamim said, you're not allowed to say his name. We call him Acher. There's a Shaila. He became an Apikoros. So why in the world was Rebbe, when he redacted Pirkei Avos, why would he quote Elisha ben Avuya? It's the only place in the whole Shas that Elisha ben Avuya is quoted. Rebbe should have done what he did in dozens of places in Shas and not quote anybody. He should just say, like many Mishnayos in Pirkei Avos, Haloi made yeled lamahu daima l'diagsu anir chadash v'haloi made zaken lamahu daima l'diagsu anir. Why do I need to know is Elisha ben Avuya? Furthermore, asked the Satmar Rebbe, there's a Mishnah in Avos Rav Nois, a Brisa in Avos Rav Nasan. The Brisa says, Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says the same limud. So Rebbe could have quoted Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Vos he has to quote Elisha ben Avuya. Frak the Divrei Yoel in Parshas Chayesara. So he says an incredible answer. Let's get some of the history of Elisha ben Avuya. The Gemara says many challenges he faced that he failed. He was Mechalo Shabbos, B'Farhesia. He read Sifrei Minim. Elisha ben Avuya had Sifrei Minim in his pocket, right? So sometimes people go to Shiur, and they're looking at something under the table, right? So the Gemara says that Elisha ben Avuya, he had something under the table during Shiur. It's not a good thing to do. It's not a good thing to do. Things don't end up well, and we're going to come back to that. But ultimately, what was the cause of Elisha ben Avuya to go off the derech? So there's a pasuk in Koheles, Toiv achris davar merishisai. Literally it means the end of something is better than the beginning. When you finish something, it's good to start a Masechta, it's better to finish it. It's good to start something, it's better to finish it. But Tosfos quotes a story that one Tana said that's what it means, Toiv achris davar merishisai, the end of something is better than the beginning, and Elisha ben Avuya Acher said that's not what Rabbi Akiva taught. Rabbi Akiva taught a different pshat. Something is only good in the end if it was good in the beginning. Nothing is ever good in the end if it didn't start out good. Toiv achris davar. Something's good in the end. Mereshisai. Because it was good in the beginning. If something doesn't start good, it doesn't end well. Says Acher, you know how I know? B'didi hava uvda. My father, Avuya, who is the father of Elisha ben Avuya? A little trivia question. Who is the father of Elisha ben Avuya, you know? Avuya. His father had a baby boy. And by the way, at the bris, they didn't name him Acher. They named him Elisha. He was destined for greatness. And he called all the Gedolei Yisrael into one bias. And Rabbi Glatstein and Rabbi Yeshua were there. And people at a bris, what are you going to do at a bris? So people started to eat and drink and clap and dance. And Rabbi Glatstein and Rabbi Yeshua said, while they're busy wasting their time, let's learn something. Let's learn Epis. So they started learning from Torah to Nevi'im to Ksuvim. A fire came down in Hashamayim, surrounded them, and Avuya said, what are you doing? You came to destroy my bris? No! We're learning Torah. When we learn Torah, it's exactly the same way as when it was given on Har Sinai, and on Har Sinai it was given to me Toich. We've reenacted Maimon Har Sinai. Says Avuya, Azoi, such is the power of Torah. If my son lives, I want him to be a Talmid Chacham like you. And that's why Elisha ben Avuya became an Apikaris. Because his father wanted covet for him. And his origins were tainted. And when your origins are tainted, then you don't end up well. Avuya says, Toiv achris davar, something's only good in the end. Merishisa, if it's good in the beginning. And I wasn't good in the beginning. My father ruined me. Because he wanted me to be a Talmid Chacham, not lishma, but for kavod. What? Oh, so if someone's asking, what do you mean? The Gemara says, M'sachim v'kama m'koymos. La'olam yasek adam b'tar mitzvah shaloi lishma, shemitach shaloi l'mashma b'lishma. So chayra, every father should want their kid to be a Talmid Chacham for kalavai. We should want our children to be Talmid Chacham for kavod. Yeah, but you have to start off good. The beginning has to be good, and then, you don't have a good education after that. But if the beginning's not good, it ain't the same. So the Samar Rebbe asked, what do you mean, La'olam yasek adam b'tar mitzvah shaloi l'shma, shemitach shaloi l'shma b'lishma? He says like this. Shaloi l'shma is great. But the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says, we know Torah protects you. Torah protects you from the Yetzer Hara. Torah protects you from Nesyonos. Only Torah Lishma protects you. Torah Shaloi Lishma doesn't protect you. It will bring you to Lishma, but it won't protect you. Elisha ben Avuya had many challenges in life. Many Nesyonos, many Taivos, that he would have been able to overcome had his father had Kavana Lishma. But because his father's Kavana was Shaloi Lishma, he was never protected and he succumbed to everything. Avada, says the Samar Rebbe, people could always do tshuva, and they could go higher, but it's fraught with danger. It's fraught with danger, he says. He says it's going to be very hard. Now, this is not his opinion, this is what Tosfos says. That Elisha ben Avuya said, if you want to know what it means, Toiv achris davar merishisai, is something will end up good when it started off good. And therefore, Samar Rebbe says something incredible. What did the life of Elisha ben Avuya demonstrate? That if you don't start young, and you don't do the beginning properly, and your origins are tainted, then you could try later, it doesn't stay the same way as if you're loimed yeled lemahu doimeh L'diyai al niyar chalak. But if you're loimed, zakein l'mahu doima, l'diyai ksuv al niyar machak. The reason why Rebbe chose to put in the name of Elisha ben Avuya is not because he forgot his name is Acher. It's because the life of Elisha ben Avuya was a living embodiment of this teaching, that you got to get it right in the beginning. Now, I'll tell you, the Balei Musar say this is not to make anyone feel guilty, but it's to understand the critical nature of the beginning of something. You could always have a new beginning. Every Rosh Hashanah is a new beginning. Every day is a new beginning. The Ben Ish Chai says every morning the Rebbeinu Shalom infuses you with a new neshama and you could start over again. But the point is that it's critical to take advantage of the haschala, because haschala sets the tone. And if you want to know who demonstrated to us that when the haschala is corrupt, it's problems in the end, that's Elisha ben Avuya. But we're not going to say his name. But we have to say his name over here, because it teaches us the lesson. The whole lesson is based on the living embodiment of Haloi Med Yeled L'Mahu Doimeh. What?
His beginning because he's the one who used to fatten the cows.
Yeah. Look, everyone has free choice. You could overcome any nisayon. And ultimately, Acher failed his nisyonos. But if you want to know why he was not protected, it's because his origins were off. In other words, nobody could blame. This is not a cop-out. It's not Acher can't cop out and say it's my father's fault. But if his father would have done the proper thing, he could have protected his kid. Doesn't mean Acher is not accountable, because he could overcome anything. A person could overcome anything. So I want to bring to your attention tonight just two practical lessons and limudim from this yesod of the concept that tuma hutra b'tzibur you can't use for chinuch, you can't use in the beginning. The beginning has to be perfect. The beginning has to be ideal. And the first one is how we start our day every morning. The Shloah HaKadosh writes in the Shar HaOisiyos, Ois Aleph, Emes Amuna, he says like this in number 22, Kisha Adam Oimed Mimitasai, when a person gets out of bed, Al Yasoik Shom Esek Ba'olam, do not get involved in anything. Don't read, don't look at, don't type. You cannot do anything. Immediately, your first words should be Divrei Tefillah. Your first maisim should be preparation for Tefillah. Your first thoughts should be Devekos HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's critical that the first moments of the day set the tone for the day. Don't allow oneself to get involved in other pursuits, because once you start the day with something else, that will set the tone for the rest of the day. And therefore the Chidah writes, look at number 23, in the Moira Be'etzba, Nachon shelo yedaber be'inyanav me'es asher yakum v'yiyeh diburai harishain levarachon. You have to be careful. The first thing you say in the morning is, hey, why'd you leave the window open last night? Why? The first thing you have to say is Tefillah HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The first word you have to capitalize. You have to make sure to take advantage of the first dibur of the morning. In fact, in the Sefer Or HaMeir, he brings that the true test of a person's madrega is what's the first thought that comes to your mind when you wake up in the morning. From that you could tell what kind of person you are. He said if the first thought is, all right, the stock market was closed today. Forgot. So then he says, you're on a very low madrega, he says. If the first thought is, Avodas Hashem, you're on a high madrega. You know where you're holding, so to speak, by what grips your mind when you open your eyes in the morning. The Bnei Yissaschar wrote many interesting psalms. He wrote Agar de Perka. He wrote Derech Pikudecha. He says a very interesting aside on the pasuk Kadesh Li Kol Bechar. He writes this in Igar de Perka, Remez Reishei. He writes this in the Derech Pikudecha, Mitzvah Yirchas, the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben. He says a person has to be Mekadesh every first to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, Maisa Rishain should be to go to prepare yourself for Tefillah. Dibor Rishain should be Divrei Shvach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Machshava Rishaina, he says the first thing that enters your mind should be the godless of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How Hashem is shoyleit in the whole world. How Hashem rules over the whole world. Lehisboinen b'memshalta yoleinu. That the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us back our neshama. Kadesh li kol bechor. Your first thought, your first words, your first actions. I even saw in a sefer, the Piskei Teshuvos brings down, the first thing you look at in the morning, you should look at the mezuzah. What's the nafkamina? No, it makes a big difference. It sets the tone for the whole day is nigrar after the way you start the day. Your first thought will train your mind for the day. As soon as you wake up in the morning, your thought should be, the Rebbeinu Shalom returned my soul to me. The Rebbeinu Shalom rules over the world. The Rebbeinu Shalom has showered me with kindness for another. That's the first thing. You have to train yourself. That should be the first thought. The first words, Maida'ani lefanecha. The first Maisa, Hachana L'Tfilah. So therefore, Eitzah Tova, I want to tell everybody, you should be makabel on yourself, not to look at your phone until after Tfilah Shachris. You want to look at it for your time, get a watch, or look at it for the time. Don't check your emails, don't check your WhatsApps, don't check anything till after you daven. Then I give you a haftacha. I spoke to a Pinchas Friedman. He said if you don't check your phone to after davening. You'll be sure you'll see good things on your phone. You'll see good things. Look, if you don't have a choice, sometimes people, they have achrayas, whatever, they have emergencies they have to tend to. It's a good eitzah, it's a very good eitzah. Do not take care of your asakim until achar tefillah. This way you set the tone for the whole day. Your first thoughts, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Your first diburim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The first maisa is hachana l'tefillah. This will set the tone. This is a kiyam of kadesh li kol bechar peter rechem. Rechem are oisi ois. Ramach ivarim. You know, your machshava, there's a whole organism of machshava. There are machivarim in the oilam ha-machshava. There are machivarim in the oilam of dibur. There are machivarim in the oilam of maisa. And if you're careful to set the tone, to start the day properly, it will be makadesh all ramachivarim. And therefore, Reb Chaim Volozhiner writes in the Keser Rosh, something badakum menusa, skula. So, an amazing school, Reb Chaim Volozhiner writes. He says, Dover menusa, kishayashkim adam baboiker, when you wake up in the morning, if you're makabel on yourself, yekabel ala bayemahu, all Torah be'emes. If when you wake up, you're lying in your bed, you say, today I accept upon myself the yoke of Torah with a whole heart. I decide, I accept, I take upon myself. I'm not going to listen to anyone. No, I have to finish the statement. Now, I'm not going to listen to anyone who deters me from the observance of the Torah. I'm not going to allow anything to interfere with my observance. To the extent of your Kabbalah every morning, to that extent, you'll be successful that day in Torah. The stronger the Haskama, the stronger the Kabbalah, the more Hatzlacha you'll have that day. Because that will set the tone for the whole day. It's that moment that you wake up, the thoughts, the ideas, the mood, the attitude, the diburim, the maisim set the tone for the whole day. As I was coming to the Shiur, I remembered one more thing. I remember when I was in yeshiva many years ago, this goes back 19 years ago. My first Chanukah in Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, it was a Chanukah Masiba, and they invited the Mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva, Rav Israel Erlanger, to the yeshiva. And he was talking about a very similar Nakuda he said over from Rav Volba, that the Gemara in Sukkah says, V'limadatem oisam espenechem ladaber bam. You have to teach your kid to speak Torah. The Gemara in Sukkah Membez. That as soon as a child knows how to speak, the Gemara says, what do you teach him? Torah and Shema. What Torah? Torah tziva lanu Moshe. And the Sifri says, we learn from here, that when a baby begins to speak, the father should speak to him b'lashon HaKodesh. And if he doesn't speak to him b'lashon HaKodesh, it's as if you buried the child, the Sifri says. Very powerful, very strong. What's the message of the Sifri? I mean, it's a scary thing. Why is it so important that the first words of the kid, Torah Tziva Lanu, why not Ring Around the Rosie? Why not Jack and Jill Went Up the Hill? Why somebody would teach their kid about two young people who go up a hill and then smash their heads open? You know, I don't think that's age appropriate, you know. Anyway, why is it so important that the child begins to speak with Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe? So Erlanger said, again, this Yesod. The point is not to feel guilty. I remember he said, the point is not to feel guilty if you didn't do it. The point is capitalizing on the beginning. And the kid begins to speak and realize that you might think it's an innocuous moment. You might think, what's the nafkamina? I teach them Shema Yisrael, or I teach them some ridiculous nursery rhyme. No, it's the beginning. The beginning sets the tone for the whole life. Whether it's the beginning of our children's lives, when it comes to chinuch, we can't rely on kulais, you can't rely on b'di'evez, you can't rely, well, you know, it's good enough. There are no good enoughs when it comes to chinuch. The beginning of something, we don't rely on heterim, we don't rely on kulais. That sets the tone for our whole lives. And the initial moment of the day sets the tone for the rest of the day. So we should talk about Zoicha, that on the Yom Tov of Chanukah, which was the chinuch of the second Beis HaMikdash, and the Sefer Kara Kemach says Chanukah represents the chinuch of the Gula Hasidah. Rebbeinu Shalom should give us the opportunity to re-inaugurate our own Avodas Hashem. Should be Zoicha, Lilmoid Ulalamed, Lishmar, Velasos, Ulaavdoi, Belev Shalom. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.